In the not-so-distant future, as Earth's resources are depleted and overpopulation threatens the survival of humanity, the United Nations come together to spearhead a great colonization program. Settlements and mining outposts are established across the solar system, bringing to Earth great wealth and prosperity. Eventually, however, those who have made their homes on the off-world colonies begin to resent the domineering influence of Earth and begin taking steps to win their independence. As tensions rise between Earth and its colonies, war seems inevitable. Does that sound familiar? This scenario, or a variation of it, has been depicted again and again across alternate worlds with varying levels of believability. The war between the Solar Associated Treaty Organization, or SATO, and the Settlement Defense Front is one such example, and unfortunately it fails to answer many of the questions this type of setting immediately raises. The first and most important, in my opinion, is how does a collection of colonists and frontier workers possibly compete with the manpower, industry, resources, economic strength, and technical expertise of a united Earth? The Settlement Defense Front can't answer this question and fails on nearly every level to present a credible or even interesting antagonist. While demographics or statistics are neither available for the Settlement Defense Front or the United Nations, it can be assumed that Earth at this point has a population of well over 10 billion, while Mars and other SetDef colonies have at most hundreds of millions, and that's if we're being especially generous. The disparity in relative power would be akin to Belgium going up against China. The most likely outcome, it seems to me, is that at the very first sign of secessionist movements, Earth would be able to mobilize an overwhelming amount of force that the Settlement Defense Front would be incapable of matching. Even economic sanctions would likely be enough to completely cripple Mars and force them to concede without much of a fight. For its entire existence as a manned colony, Mars would have been reliant and closely integrated with Earth. Suddenly declaring its independence would likely cause more harm than good, at least in the immediate short term. But another question is, why would Mars or other colonies want to secede in the first place? What is Earth doing exactly that has alienated seemingly everyone who left it? The common answer, both in this depiction and others, is that in the eyes of the colonists, resources and wealth that should have been going towards them is instead being sent to fund greedy interests on Earth. I don't buy this. While you can point to many examples across history of plucky colonials rising up against their imperial overlords after a period of repression, I'd like to think that humanity has learned from those examples and decisions made at the highest levels of government are a little more reasonable than those made during the 18th century. It would be in Earth's best interest to keep its colonies happy, and I'm sure there'd be plenty of incentives that would make life on Mars particularly appealing. Even if you disagree with that assessment, governments make unpopular decisions all the time, and it very rarely ends in a war of secession, especially in a modern developed nation. The majority of independence movements, particularly those based in democratic societies like how the United Nations is depicted in this future, enjoy very limited support, with even disgruntled members preferring to achieve their goals through legitimate political methods. I don't see the justification for why the Settlement Defense Front wouldn't be treated the same way by the majority of the population. Nevertheless, in this instance, the Settlement Defense Front somehow manages to obtain enough support to declare its independence anyways. But the other major issue SetDef immediately has is that unless every single citizen agreed with that decision, a potentially large segment of its population is opposed to the new regime. Surely there's at least a few people on Mars who wouldn't be so willing to throw away their Earth citizenship. So now the front is opposed by both the forces of the UN and a resistance within their own population. Any nation in the position the Settlement Defense Front found itself in would be at an enormous disadvantage. But somehow, once again, the front is able to rise above these odds, winning control of Mars and various other territories across the solar system. From here, SetDef resembles a cartoon villain rather than a realistic nation. While details on its society are scarce, the information we do get only serves to reinforce the idea that these are the bad guys with no nuance whatsoever. Let's pick a couple of those details to focus on. First, every male citizen in the front is required to take part in 15 years of military service starting at age 12. This is insane. While we can assume that some sort of additional schooling takes place during this time and that half the front's population isn't limited to a 7th grade education, the cost-to-benefit ratio of 15 years of military service is indefensible. Mass conscription like this removes an enormous amount of productivity from the workplace, and even if no salary were paid, the cost of maintaining such a large force during peacetime is not sustainable. A strong economy is critical to winning any war, and the Settlement Defense Front has essentially shot itself in the stomach. This cartoonish approach to governance extends to the actions of the front's leadership. In one of his first encounters with Sato Marines, Admiral Salen Koch executes one of his own men to demonstrate his willingness to go to any length to achieve victory. His intention here is to be intimidating, but he comes across like someone truly desperate to be taken seriously. A willingness to squander resources and potential is not threatening, and not something a nation like the Settlement Defense Front should be supporting. Their greatest disadvantage is a lack of manpower, and Koch has wasted not only a life, but years of training and economic investment. And also, what was the point of this overly dramatic display? For a man whose sole mission is to eradicate the Earth he despises, he goes through a lot of effort to try and impress some random Sato Marine he's just going to kill a few moments later. Actions like this define the Settlement Defense Front. Shock value is placed above self-interest, and as a result, SetDef as a society makes no sense. How is a civilization with a fraction of Earth's resources able to amass such a huge army and fleet without bankrupting itself? What is it about Earth they hate so much that they're willing to resort to genocide? What exactly is their goal? What is their ideology? None of these questions have satisfactory answers. I have a lot of problems with this world. No navy would assemble every one of its warships for a fleet review, Salen Koch is much too young to be a credible admiral, and everything else is full of cliches or generally forgettable. My biggest problem, however, is how the war between the Settlement Defense Front and the Solar Associated Treaty Organization is depicted. From the opening attack on Geneva to the death of Admiral Koch and the destruction of Mars's shipyards, the entire conflict lasts just one day. Somewhere on Earth, a guy was recovering from a bad hangover and slept through an intergalactic war. The conflict lacks any sense of scale, with warships and marines able to zip around the solar system instantaneously, and with this in mind, many of the tactics and strategies used by both sides don't take this into account. Worse still though, it reduces the Settlement Defense Front to a complete laughingstock. A nation that was able to achieve a spectacular opening surprise attack and be completely defeated just 24 hours later. Sato likewise comes across as especially inept, having lost almost all their ships in the opening attack to an enemy that shouldn't have been able to challenge them in the first place. But that of course is just my opinion, and even though I am incapable of error, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Did I miss the point of the Settlement Defense Front? Does it make total sense that Sato could go from the brink of defeat to victory in just one day? Let me know in the comments, unless you're just going to tell me I sound kind of weird. I have a virus, it hurts to talk, it's not my fault. Until next time, this has been Incoming.
The Templin Institute investigates alternate worlds and realities. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to directly support us, vote in polls to determine future topics, and receive some cool rewards, please consider pledging to our Patreon page.